Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming out and joining me today to hear about this plot twist. Developers actually do care about security. My name is Madeline Vanderpelt. I am a development manager at Trend Micro. Started off as a software developer there. I'm a lifelong learner. I love learning. I love teaching. I love experimenting with things. And in my free time, I'm a yoga enthusiast. Today, I'd like to talk to you a bit about what goes on in a developer's mind when we're actually writing code. What are we thinking about? What goes into that? And then connecting that with our security process and how those two things either work together or maybe they don't. And then where we can target our time investments to create maybe a more smooth or streamlined experience for our developers and our security teams, and reduce developer effort to do that in the process. I want to start off by acknowledging I am not an expert. I am just sharing with you some of the things that my teams have done, the things that I've experienced myself, and what I've learned from those experiences. So I hope some of these experiences help you, give you ideas, inspire you, and yeah, with that, let's dive into it. So I read an article a couple months ago. This was in a white paper called The Challenges and Opportunities to Improve Software Security. It was published by Secure Code Warrior. And the thing that really stood out to me was this stat, that only 14% of developers list security as their top priority when writing code. I'm just gonna let that sink in for a second. Only 14% of developers. So that means there's, what, 86% of developers that don't. If you, I don't know, how many people are developers in the room here? I can sort of see hands. Okay, a few, awesome. If you were to think for a second, and I said, what are the top 3 things that are on your mind when you're writing code? What would they be? Would security actually be one of them? Yeah, what would they be? Also, this is a conversation. I'm not lecturing at you. I would love to actually hear from you. I have swag to throw at you if you answer my questions. So, yeah. Okay, security is a quality metric to a developer. Right. I really like what you just said there. He said sanitizing inputs. SQL injection is just sanitizing inputs. So a developer's not thinking about SQL injection, they're thinking about sanitizing their inputs. It's a different mindset, right? And that's what I really want to dive into. So I actually took a stab at this myself, and I didn't limit myself to 3 things. I said, what is everything I'm thinking about while I'm developing software? And this is what I came up with. So I have things like data representation, localization, testing, quality assurance, UX requirements, lunch, my cat who's walking across the screen, you know? Like, everything in my environment impacts what I'm thinking about. And what you'll notice is only a couple of these things were related to security, right? We have privacy, we have security itself, we have compliance. And when I looked at this, I went, okay, no wonder only 14% of developers list security as a priority. We have so much going on inside of our brains that it's kind of impossible to be thinking about all of these things at one time. And then I thought about what AWS helps us with. So all the orange ones are things that can be made easier or simpler, or sometimes removed altogether with the help of serverless solutions, with the help of Amazon Web Services. Things like scalability, right? When we're thinking about serverless applications, you're using maybe a Lambda or Dynamo in AWS. Scalability isn't as impactful. I don't have to think about it as much because they've done that heavy lifting for me. And I can actually sort of remove that from my bubble here and focus on some of the other areas. And I'm not saying they go away entirely, but the cognitive capacity that it takes to think about all these things is reduced. And I can sort of, for the sake of argument here, take them out of my bubble. And so now this is what we're left with, and it's a lot less. And you'll notice that we're still thinking about lunch. We're still thinking about our customer needs, the actual requirements. We're thinking about the architecture. And what if we could actually do the same thing with security requirements? What if we could reduce the cognitive capacity that they take so that our developers don't have to think about them either? Well, AWS can help us with those too. Like I said before, it won't take them away entirely, but it will reduce that cognitive capacity. And there's things like the shared responsibility model, right? There's existing patterns from AWS that are available. For those that aren't as familiar, the shared responsibility model, basically AWS handles security of the cloud. So the cloud infrastructure, hardware, the networking, those sort of things. And then the customer, in this case me, would handle security in the cloud. So the configuration of those resources, managing the data, IAM access, things like that. So if a developer uses managed services, then we can actually reduce this further. And that's what I kind of want to talk a bit about today. And then you have a happy developer. So when you think about going from that mind map that had all of those crazy things that we were thinking about into just this, where I'm focused on my customer, I'm focused on the architecture. What am I actually building? How do I actually want to build it? What are the requirements for that? How are people going to use it, right? And I'm not focused on the rest of those things because they're just lower in my mind now. They don't take as much care and attention. So let's back up a second again. Why isn't security a priority for developers? Well, as you saw, we had competing priorities, right? All those things happening. Sometimes there's a lack of prioritization from management, right? Sometimes our priorities might be a deadline that we have to meet, or we have a customer who's banging down our door for a feature, and they really, really want it, and they want it now, and they wanted it yesterday, and we're just trying to get it out the door. And when we do that, sometimes things slip. And sometimes that thing that slips is security. The security process may or may not exist. Maybe we don't have a security process. Maybe if we do, it's too rigid or it doesn't fit the workflow of our developers, and so they don't want to follow it. Or maybe, as a developer, you look at this process that was designed for you, and it's not helping you, and you think it's actually slowing you down, right? That can cause a lot of frustration, a lot of tension between our security and our development teams. There's also manual toil that can be introduced in any process, right? Things that aren't automated that possibly could be. That's never really fun when you're doing a repetitive task over and over and over again. That's why we as developers automate things. Maybe there's a lack of secure code skills, right? There could be a knowledge gap, skills gap, and there's lots of things that we can do to close that gap, right? To empower our developers and transfer that knowledge. And the last one here is actually one of the most interesting to me, the perceived value from effort. And what I mean by that is when I, as a developer, get tasked with creating a feature, I get excited, I get the requirements, I build it, I ship it to my customers, and we're using continuous integration, continuous delivery, so that happens within minutes of me delivering that code to production. It's in my customer's hands. And through monitoring, through metrics, I can actually see my customers using it. I can feel that value, right? I have put that in their hands, and it's tangible. When we think about security, it's not the same, is it? When we think about security, the value doesn't come, it doesn't show up, it doesn't show its face until we have a security incident, right? We put all this effort into securing our applications, into learning how to write a good IAM policy, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, we never see the value from it because we'd never have a security incident. And it's hard as a developer to go from, here's all this effort I'm putting in, here, customer, go have fun, go enjoy, this is a great feature I built for you, to, oh, well, I just spent all this time and energy and effort, and nobody's gonna even notice. So I find that one a very interesting concept personally, and one of the reasons that perhaps in a developer's mind it comes lower on the priority list. So if you do have a security process, I want you to reflect for a moment, and if you don't have a security process, then I definitely want you to think about these things as well. Who should actually be involved in that process? Or who should be involved in the process of building the process? How does your process actually empower developers to move quickly? And notice I didn't say does your process empower developers to move quickly. I said how. What tangible ways are you empowering your developers? And not just your developers, but your security teams. Can they actually get the information that they need quickly, easily? How many ways can you achieve the same outcome? Do you have to use that tool? Do you have to use that exact process? What is it that you're actually trying to achieve? And how can we build in flexibility? And I think this is a really important one, because if your process doesn't match the workflow, it doesn't mesh with it, then how can we adapt it? In our company, my teams, I have 3 teams. They're all fairly similar in how they deploy their code. They're not exactly the same. And if I look around just in my office in Ottawa, we have lots of teams. They definitely don't do things the same way every single time across every single team. So we need solutions that are flexible, that we can adapt, that aren't rigid and stuck in some box, basically. And who should be involved in picking the training that we give to our developers for security? Who here has had to do security training before? Hands up. All right, hands down. Who's enjoyed doing their security training before? All right, 2 hands. Okay. That's not a lot. Security training, and any training really, needs to be engaging, because otherwise people aren't going to remember it. They're going to zone out, they're going to put it on 2 times speed, they're going to put it on in a different tab while they go do something else. I know everybody in this room has probably done that at one point in their life. So if we want it to be engaging, we need to talk to our customers, we need to talk to our development teams and say, what is it that you need? Where are those gaps? And what I really want to emphasize here is that we don't just have developers and security experts. We have 2 groups of experts. We have developers who are experts at what they're building. They know the ins and outs. They can tell you every nitty-gritty detail that you really don't want to know about their architecture and about their application and what resources they're deploying in the cloud and how they're deploying it and all the different steps along the way. They can tell you all of this. And our security experts, they're experts in risk identification. They're experts in mitigation strategies, in compliance requirements, and all sorts of things security related. And so I noticed, to me, it feels really wrong that these 2 groups of experts are siloed, oftentimes. And developers hand something over the line to security, and they say, hey, help me secure this, or secure it for me, right? And security hands things over the line to developers, and they say, here's a process. We've built it for you. It's shiny. It's wonderful. Follow it, please. And the developers go, hang on a second. I don't want to, right? So how can we help these 2 groups share this knowledge, bridge this divide, and accelerate each other, right? That's really what we're trying to do here. So speaking of process, how many of you have felt like this? Pulling your hair out because somebody handed you a process that doesn't make any sense to you, you didn't necessarily ask for it, and you don't want to do it. Maybe it's a lot of work, maybe it's that perceived value from effort that we've been talking about. But I can guarantee you I have felt like this many times. So I have a little story for you. At Trend, we used to have 6 checklists related to security. You had a new feature, new service that you wanted to put in production, you had to follow 6 checklists. And each checklist had more than 10 things on the checklist. So we got a lot of things to go through. And when you actually started going through these checklists, there was some redundancy, there was a lot of words that didn't make a lot of sense. There was a very big knowledge gap in what exactly you needed me as a developer to do. What is the value you want me to provide? I'm sorry. So there was confusion over requirements, there was this redundant work, there were too many checklists. It was just, nobody wanted to do it. So our development teams actually talked to our security team, and we told them about our pain with this. We said, hey, you know, this really isn't working for us. We can do better than this. Let's do better than this. So our security experts, they actually heard us. They went away. I thought, you know, nothing's gonna happen, but it did. They came back a little while later and they said, look, we've taken these 6 checklists and we turned it into 1. And my first reaction was to laugh because I figured that one checklist just had all 60 of those items now. But it didn't. They had actually consolidated and removed the redundancy and figured out how to turn it into something new that developers could follow along. They could see why they were doing these things. It explained how to test for certain things. It explained the reasoning. And I know myself as a developer, I'm a very logical person. I like knowing the why. And so that really helped me. So they also removed manual effort that was required in going through some of these checklists. Of course, there's still a little bit here and there we're trying to clean up, but they took a lot of the manual toil, that pain that we were feeling, and they got rid of it. And now we can actually focus on what's required. The developers actually know what's required of them, specifically, and more people are doing the checklists. More people are actually following the process because it's now more flexible. The checklists actually say, hey, if you're not deploying a service of this type, ignore this section completely, right? They say, if your service follows these characteristics or you're deploying using this mechanism, we've already done the checklist for that. You don't have to do it again, right? And so it was this combined team effort, and it's really provided a lot of value already to our teams. And this is, I went from that to a much more calm Madeline. Yeah. So this is just one example of how we targeted our time investments. And again, I want you to reflect on your processes, or the lack of a process, and think about how could you eliminate that manual work? What could you automate that isn't automated? What tools are you using, and are they actually making your lives easier for security and developers, right? We want tools that work for both teams. What's causing the most frustration? And have you actually talked to those teams? Have you actually had those conversations and said, hey, what pain are you having? What can I do for you, right? On both sides. Like I said before, we need security teams to be able to find the information they're looking for with ease, without having to talk to a developer, right? And what key areas does your feedback loop identify for improvement? Do you even have a feedback loop, right? Maybe let's start there. So I want to focus now on some of the ways that we could reduce developer effort, some of the things that we've tried and, you know, have worked for us, haven't worked for us. And yeah, if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to shout them out. You don't have to wait till the end. This is where I want your help. We have a very simple cloud native application. This is not a real thing, but it definitely exists somewhere on the internet. We have an Amazon event bridge, presumably with events flowing to it. And we have a Lambda on the other side of that event bridge, consuming those events and putting them into a DynamoDB table. Fairly standard stuff. On the other side, we have an Amazon API gateway with an endpoint and the Lambda listening to that API endpoint and calling and fetching some data. Okay, fairly straightforward service. How could we secure this service? How could we do better? What should we consider? Shout it out if you have ideas. I have swag for you. Also, I didn't throw one at you earlier, so here you come. Because I owe you one. Oh, sorry. Close, I was close. All right. Yeah. Yeah, firewall in front of the API gateway, cool. Like a WAF or something? Yeah. I'm gonna, yeah. Oh, okay. I gotta get better. All right, we're going overhand next. A WAF in front of API gateway. What else could we do? Authorizer on our Lambda, yeah. Let's decide who has access to our API. Oh, caught that one. Nice. What else? So we got a WAF, we got an authorizer. Is it secure? Are we done? Yep. Sorry, can you say that again? Yeah, so vulnerabilities in our deploy agents and the process we're actually using to deploy this. Yep, we could look for vulnerabilities in there. Our deployment process definitely should not be ignored. It's a great one. Okay. I'm getting closer. All right, what else? Come on, there's way more than this. I have a whole list. Proper IAM policies, yeah. With WAF? Yeah, I think someone said that already, but I'll give you one. Yep. We have an application here, super simple. How could we secure it? Yeah. Encrypt Dynamo, no, they didn't. Here you go. Nice. Encrypt Dynamo, probably with a KMS key, probably with a customer managed KMS key. Anybody else? Yep. Sorry? Access controls in general, yeah. Look at our policies that we've got on our Lambdas, on our Dynamo tables, on our AWS account. Yeah, awesome. Okay. Those are a lot of the ones I came up with too. What about CloudWatch for monitoring logs, alarms, suspicious activity, anything like that? We can actually lock down our AWS accounts entirely. This is what we do for our teams. Our teams only have read permissions into staging and prod AWS accounts. And by read permissions, I mean they can go in and see logs. They can't go into our Dynamo table and start looking at customer data. They can't go poking around in other people's services. They can just see logs, metrics, CloudWatch alarms, that sort of information. Someone said an authorizer on the API gateway, IAM permissions policies. With our pipeline, we talked about, we have third-party vulnerability scanning, maybe some security checklists or processes involved there, unit tests, end-to-end tests, right? Let's make sure our application's only doing what we expect it to do. So lots of different things we could do here. And we came up with that as a team. No, not one of us came up with all of those things, right? Even I didn't. I asked my team, what would you do? I didn't put this whole list together myself. So we need to build this knowledge because each of us in this room had some of that knowledge already, right? What we just did is share it. We shared our expertise with each other, came up with ways we could secure that application. So let's take all of that. Let's have teaching moments where we share our knowledge with each other. Let's identify training opportunities that actually work for us instead of creating work for us, right? Let's add security guides in maybe our pull request templates. just to double check. Have you considered this, right? Let's ask each other questions. You can also review applications with the AWS well-architected tool, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And you can help your teams understand the tooling. How can we use these tools better to actually help us as opposed to just using these tools? We recently did an AWS serverless training with my team. We got 25 developers who were, some of them were new to serverless or developing in the cloud altogether. Some of them had more experience. We got them all together, did an AWS instructor-led training, and it was really cool. And even the experienced developers, when I did a session survey afterwards, because feedback is important, and every single person, when I asked them, what was the new thing that you learned? Or what's the thing you want to learn more about? Almost everybody said security. There was a little area on it in the training. It wasn't security training itself. It was about developing serverless solutions. And they all identified security. Like we said, IAM policies. Let's understand those. What does wildcard actually do? It's different in KMS than it is in an IAM policy. Why, right? What does that mean? And everybody wanted to learn more about WAF. They wanted to learn more about actually locking down their applications on all the ways that we talked about a few minutes ago. And I thought that was really, really cool. But it also meant that maybe we're not providing the right type of training to our developers, right? The next one is getting buy-in. So what is the very first thing you do when you're thinking about a new feature? Anybody? The very first thing you do? Or one of the first things, yeah. Gather design requirements. I'm not gonna give you one yet. From where? Where do we gather our design requirements from? The customers, yeah. There you go. Yeah, we talk to our customers. Maybe that's not you specifically. Maybe it's your product manager. Maybe it's somebody else. But you talk to your customers. You figure out if your idea is something that's gonna work for them. If it's something that they want. Is it something we can actually build? Feasibility is important, right? Is it something they're gonna pay us for, right? We have to get that buy-in from our customers. We have to get buy-in from our teams. Why is this important for us to build? Why are you taking me off of this other project and putting me over here? I liked what I was doing, right? We have to get buy-in from our teams and buy-in from executives or managers or whoever else is involved in the idea, right? It's all about the customer when we're thinking about what we're building. And that shouldn't be any different when what we're building is a security process. Who are your customers? The people who have to use this process or this tool, right? So I got another story for you. I told you I'd have a lot of stories. Our development teams were approached by the security team, or a member of their team, and they promised this wonderful, beautiful, shiny new tool that would detect secrets that had been checked into our source code. And I was like, that sounds like a really good idea. Why don't we already do this? It's like, okay, all right, you got me. I'm interested. What do we have to do to use this? And they said, oh, it's really, really simple. You just have to add this thing to your GitHub repo. And I said, each repo? And they were like, yeah, just add it to every single GitHub repository that you have, and it will check if secrets have been checked into your source code. And I was like, honey, that ain't not gonna work for me. Like, that is not gonna work. My teams alone have over 100 repositories, just in my 3 teams. Why can't we apply this at the organization? And they looked at me and they were a little confused at first, and they were like, we didn't, well, it's not built for that. I said, well, who built it? And they said, we did. I said, well, why isn't it built for that, right? And I took a step back and I realized, well, they had never talked to their customers about what they would need this tool to do or how they would need to interact with the tool, right? They didn't have that customer-centric view when they were designing it. And so we missed that opportunity to make it something awesome and excite our developers with it. So what I'm getting at here is you gotta get buy-in. You gotta help people understand the why and understand their requirements as well. Had these two teams collaborated, I think developers would have jumped all over this tool. We would have been super excited by it. We acknowledge that, yeah, there probably is secrets checked in source code somewhere. Something happened a long time ago, nobody knows about it. Maybe the person who owns the service is no longer even with the company. You don't know, right? So if we had got buy-in, we could have had something that was awesome and fun and engaging, and people would have actually enjoyed. All right. I told you I'd come back to the well-architected tool, so here we are. For anyone who's not familiar with it, there's 6 pillars. Among those 6 is security. And what the well-architected tool is basically just a set of questions. It's available in the AWS UI. And it has a whole bunch of questions that you go through, the goal of which is to identify gaps in your service, in the way that you've deployed it, in the way that you're operating it, in its reliability and security, and so on. There's also optional lenses that you can add, which essentially just give another perspective and a different view of your service. Other questions to think about. One of those is a serverless application lens. I've used it before. It's additional 10-ish questions. And what I found out recently is you can actually create your own custom lenses. And the reason I think this is really cool is because you can share these custom lenses across AWS accounts. And like I said, my teams have hundreds of GitHub repositories. We have hundreds of AWS accounts. We're not all working in the exact same space. So whatever we create has to be easily adaptable to new AWS environments, to new teams, and so on. So we can create these custom lenses where we define our own best practices, where we decide what questions we're going to ask our developers and how we want them to think about their services, right? And we can work together, the development team, the security team, to come up with that. So I haven't done this yet myself, but I got really intrigued when I learned about it recently, and I thought it was worth sharing as something that I might try in the next couple months. We talked about automation, removing manual toil, reducing developer effort. There's some things here that might be new to you, some that might look very familiar. Essentially, this is a very high-level view of our development pipeline. It's not the entire thing, because that wouldn't fit on the slide, but it's a very brief overview of some of the security things that we do in our pipelines. First things first, we have to create our build environment. For us, often that's a container. Then, like someone mentioned earlier, we need to know that what we're using to deploy our code itself is secure. So we scan that container. We happen to use Cloud Run Container Security for that. That checks that anything that's installed in that container doesn't have third-party vulnerabilities that are known. Make sure that we're following best practices there. Some of the other ones on the side there are probably familiar to you, like running end-to-end tests, running unit tests, even scanning for third-party dependencies in your code. And again, checking that they don't have known vulnerabilities. Then there's a couple in the middle there that might be new. So we lint our CloudFormation templates. And what a linter is, it's basically just a set of rules that we've created that we've decided are our best practices, that we want our teams to follow, that we want to share across teams. And anyone, any developer, anybody can go and add new rules to the linter. We've had an incident, we are doing our blameless incident, post-incident review, and we've discovered that if we just had a rule for this in our linter, this wouldn't have gone through. Okay, great, let's add it, right? Everyone is empowered to do that. And so when this scans, checks for all those best practices, and that has to pass, right? Each of these things has to pass before it'll go on to the deploy step. We scan our CloudFormation template as well with Cloud One conformity, which checks for misconfigurations and security best practices and follows AWS best practices and recommendations as well. And this will point out anything like, hey, you left your S3 bucket wide open to the world. Don't do that. And it'll block your build, and you'll have to go fix it before you can move on. Misconfiguration is one of the most common issues, and it's one of the easiest to prevent with something as simple as scanning your template, right? Like, that's not adding any burden on me as a developer. Sorry, do you have a question? No, okay. I thought I saw a hand. It's not adding any burden on me as a developer. It just happens automatically. And it lets me know before I've deployed anything that, hey, you might want to go check this. Are you sure you want to do that, right? So low investment, high reward. And those are the types of things that I look for as a developer when I'm thinking about tools, when I'm thinking about security. The last one there is the compliance check. And the compliance checker is probably a new concept for many of you. It's not something I'd heard of before we decided to build one. Essentially, there's certain things in our infrastructure, like IAM policies and roles and permissions, or KMS keys, that require our compliance team to sign off on changes to them. Somebody has to just double check. And at first, developers had to know, okay, I'm making a change to a policy or I'm adding a new set of permissions. I have to go and add the code review team for the compliance check, as well as my regular team. Okay, so this places the burden on the developer in that they have to know to go and look for somebody, or they have to know what to look for that will require a compliance check. They have to then page out the other team for a review. Places a lot of burden on that team. They have to go, yeah, okay, you actually do need a review here, or no, actually, this isn't one of the things that falls under compliance. You're fine. Thanks for checking in, I guess, but you interrupted my day, right? So, not a great system. Then we decided to use code owners on those files that contained these permissions and policies and different things. And essentially what that means is whenever someone tries to make a change to one of those files, the code owner gets automatically added to the review. So this took the burden of knowledge away from the developer. But those files also contained a lot of other things. Think about your CloudFormation template, right? A lot of the times we put everything in one CloudFormation template. What if I'm not changing anything related to IAM or KMS or things that need a review? They're gonna get pinged anyway. So this led to a lot of false positives and a lot of angry compliance code reviewers. And they came knocking on our door and they said, hey, this isn't gonna work for us. So we had to find a new way. So what they did is we worked together. One of our teams built a compliance checker, which is basically just a little bot, scans through your CloudFormation template and looks at the changes in your pull request and goes, hey, yeah, you changed things and you're adding a new policy here. We should double check this one. And then it'll ping the compliance team automatically for a review. And it'll also look at your CloudFormation template and go, yeah, you're good to go. There's nothing here that you need to worry about. You've passed all the rest of these scans and checks. You're fine. And it won't ping anybody. The developer doesn't need to know. The compliance team's only getting pinged when they're actually needed. And so this was a really cool evolution from where we started to where we are now. And I'm sure there's still ways we could improve this and make it even better. But that's where we're at the current moment. So lots of different ways that we can scan our containers, our deployment mechanisms, our code to check for all sorts of different things without needing a developer to have as much knowledge, right? We can automate some of these things. The last one I want to touch on is threat modeling. Who here has ever heard of a threat model? Awesome, a few people, cool. So threat models, very high level. It's a tool for developers and security to collaborate, share expertise, share knowledge, and identify risks and mitigation strategies. And it sounds very boring to me as a developer because I want to build things. I don't want to think about where all these risks are, and I don't necessarily know where all the risks are. That's why we have to talk together. And the very first time I was told about threat modeling, I was very apprehensive. I didn't want to do it. I looked at this wiki they'd given me that I had to fill out. It looked like a lot of work, and it was. And I didn't even know where to start because I'd never done one of these before. And instead of saying, "That's okay, little developer, off you go," our security expert at the time sat down with me for an hour. And in that hour, we did the entire threat model, start to finish. I learned a ton about identifying risks and different types of risks that were applicable to the application I was trying to deploy. I learned a ton about mitigation strategies and realized we're already doing a lot of these things. And that's really cool, but I didn't know why we were doing some of them because I had followed what other teams were doing. So it was a really interesting experience. There was still a lot of, I'll say, apprehension from the developers about doing threat models. And this is one of those things that the security team recently revamped. And they took out all of the redundant information in there, and they said, hang on, we've already secured all of this. We've already done the threat modeling for all the stuff around your application. Let's focus just on what are you deploying, what is changing. Okay, you're following this deployment mechanism, we know that already. We've done the threat model for that already. We don't need to do that part again. And it really shifts the security conversation into the development conversation and merges those two things at the start of the development cycle. If you do this, once you've found your customer requirements, once you've kind of come up with an architecture, you think you know what you want to build, you're pretty sure this is the way you're going to go, but before you've actually implemented everything, then you don't have to go back afterwards and fix it and bring it up to the security standards. You can build that in right from day one. It does require a little bit of manual effort, but at some point in our security processes, we have to, as humans, think about what we're deploying, think about what the risks are, identify mitigation strategies, right? We can't automate everything yet, or maybe ever. But in my experience, this is one of those things that actually does have a high value for the time investment that you put into it, because your developers are learning from the security experts. Your security experts are learning from your developers about how they're deploying, what cloud resources they're using. And it builds trust between those teams too. It opens the doorway for more conversations like we've been talking about this entire time. So what I want to know is, how will you empower each other? How will you take all of these things we've been thinking about and reflecting on today, and what are you actually going to change? What would you like to change? How are you going to empower your teams, your coworkers, to go from this, all of those things in your brain, and make them happy developers, happy security experts, happy people, where we can focus on what we're really invested in, where our time really matters, those customer requirements, those architecture discussions, the things that are going to help create the customer experience we want to provide, right? Thank you so much for coming out to my talk today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions, you can fire away or come up to see me afterwards. Again, my name is Madeline, and it's been a pleasure.